everybody. I'm Evie Roberts, and this is my podcast, Talking in the Dark. Welcome. The aim of this podcast is to raise awareness about blindness, visual impairment, and disability in general, in a happy and light-hearted way. For those of you that don't know, I am blind. I was born with a condition called bilateral anophthalmia. Try spelling that one. It basically means that when I was born, my eyes didn't develop properly, so I wear prosthetics instead. The goal of this podcast is to remove some of the stigma and stereotypes around disabilities, whilst also having fun at the same time. Each week, I will be interviewing people from all walks of life, including some with hidden or physical disabilities like mine, and getting to know a little bit more about them and the lives they lead. In this episode, I am very excited to tell you that I will be talking to founder of Attitude is Everything, Suzanne Bull MBE. My name is Evie Roberts, and this is my podcast, Talking in the Dark. Welcome. Hi Suzanne, how are you doing?
Hello, Evie. I'm fine, thank you. I'm very excited to be interviewed by you. Thank you very much.
Oh, do you know, it's such a pleasure to have you on the podcast. I mean, you've had such an interesting, life so far, and you've done some really incredible things throughout it. So I'm super excited to kind of hear about them in more detail. But before we get into any of that, what have you been up to today?
So today I've had quite a kind of standard day where I've had quite a lot of meetings that are like operational about what we're doing with programs and activity. But then this afternoon, I've also been drafting some panel questions because I'm going to be at Green Events and Innovation Solutions 17 in a couple of weeks with a greener future. And we're going to have a panel discussion with some experts about how we've worked on a program with a greener future and Julie's Bicycle to discuss how climate change solutions have to be accessible to disabled people as well.
Oh, that sounds really, really exciting. And, I've when I was doing research for you, I heard a little bit about this project, and it is a really, really interesting project. But I mean, when it comes to things like this, when you're drafting panel questions, when you're at events like this, how does it make you feel? Do you get quite excited about presenting things like that, or are you more anxious about it?
So I suppose there is a certain amount of nerves because I personally think you can't do this kind of thing without having some kind of level of nerves and adrenaline to get you going. But I've got kind of like quite a lot of experience in public speaking and kind of fronting campaigns, whether that be with Attitude is Everything and talking about access to music and live events for disabled people, or other things that I do in my personal life. And I think where it comes from is when I was at school, I went to a mainstream school. It was part of an experiment in the 1970s to get disabled people educated alongside non-disabled kids. And in my school, in my senior school, there were like between 5 and 7 disabled kids there. But when I was in primary school, what they used to do was ask me in all the plays. Sometimes I was in the plays, but often they'd ask me to be the narrator of the
Mhm.
story to the audience, because of the way that I seem to be able to speak quite strongly, and also because I even from a little kid I wrote a lot as well. And I think the confidence in sort of like public speaking and explaining things, I think that's where it stems from.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, it probably is. But I find it interesting, do you still write a lot to this day? And, what is it that you enjoy about writing?
So yeah, I do write to this day. I like writing kind of silly things. Journaling, I think, is really important to me. I've written plays before as well. But for the last 4.5 years, it probably is, I've been writing a blog. And the blog is in my nickname. It's called The Musings of Spew, and Spew is my nickname from school. But basically, I've been writing a blog or asking other people to come on as guest bloggers to talk about the experience of being disabled and then getting diagnosed with cancer and what that can be like and how it adds extra complexities, whether that's kind of like access. For me, I had breast cancer, so it was access to the mammogram or to the radiotherapy treatment and everything, to like not feeling like represented, because in all the leaflets you don't see anyone like yourself, and no one really has any information at all about disabled people and examples that and data that's comparison for you, and it feels quite isolating and it feels quite lonely. So that's why I've been writing a blog. And since I've been writing that blog, it's opened me up to all sorts of interesting people, all sorts of interesting cancer patients, whether they're disabled or not. And the power of social media is we can all kind of get together and put things into the open and talk about things. And that's been like incredibly helpful to me. And I think my blog is helpful. Well, so the feedback I get is that my blog is helpful to other people too. So,
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm sure it is. And I know you've sort of spoken openly about that kind of lack of representation that there is for disabled people who, also are suffering with cancer. And I think it is, I think it is a really noticeable representation, that lack of representation when you do actually look into it. But, kind of when did you first pick up on that lack of representation, and when did you decide that you wanted to do something about it?
oh, it's right from the start. I think once I was diagnosed, I had so many questions which no one could really answer. So I went on to kind of like all of like the online kind of forums that Macmillan have and Breast Cancer Now have, and people were incredibly helpful and supportive, but they just couldn't answer the things that I was asking them. And then I just thought, oh no, I've got to kind of react to this, and I don't want anyone else to be in the same situation. So I've got one friend who's got the same impairment as me, and she also had breast cancer, but she had a different type of it. So all I had was like one friend in the beginning that I could talk to about it. Obviously, like my sister had breast cancer as well, so I could talk to her, but my sister's not disabled, or at least she wasn't until she went through cancer treatment. So it was really hard. Plus, like we were in the middle of a pandemic and everyone was isolated away from one another. So all you had really was online stuff or the telephone, and sort of that made the experience of being in the middle of a pandemic even more surreal than it would have been.
God, yeah, I can absolutely. I mean, going through something like that is hard enough, but then you throw in the fact that you're in the middle of a pandemic, no one can see each other, you're all self-isolating. I mean, that makes it almost 10 times harder. And I mean, obviously a big part of, your cancer journey is obviously the treatment. So, can you tell me a little bit about that? And did you notice any kind of, I guess, differences in that, because was it affected in any way because we were in the pandemic at the time?
Yeah, it was. I got diagnosed on the 10th of March, and then on the 13th of March, I got a phone call to say, like, you have to stay in. We've had to put you in the what was then called the clinically extremely vulnerable group. And I was like, what do you mean? I go out all the time. And they were like, no, the country's about to lock down, but you need to lock down sooner. Oh, and by the way, we're cancelling your operation because it's too unsafe for you to have your operation, because you could catch COVID and that would be incredibly serious for you. And it was just completely surreal. I think the only way I could deal with it was I just sort of switched my mind off, and
Yeah.
pretended that it wasn't happening. I think my mind actually itself just got to a point where it just completely switched off. And it was like being on a long kind of summer holiday, because ironically, that time during COVID, that summer was actually really nice and really hot. So it was an odd situation to be in, because normally when you get diagnosed, depending how things are going, you would have your operation maybe like a couple of weeks after, unless they have to do it the other way around, where they give you the treatment first and then you have your operation. So it was really, it's just with cancer, the faster you act, the better the outcomes could be for you. So that was an incredibly dangerous, well, it was a life-threatening situation to be in. So
Yeah, 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 absolutely. I mean, it's it's I can't really imagine everything you must have been going through, but I do, it must have been such a difficult situation to be in, and I'm not surprised your mind kind of switched off. You're going through about 10 different things at once, and then oh yeah, let's just throw a global pandemic in there as well, just because why not? Like,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
that's right.
I mean, I if it's okay to ask this, obviously having a disability and having and going through cancer treatment, have you found that your kind of disability has been affected in any way whilst kind of going through it? Have you found that there are things you can't do anymore? Has it been okay?
Yeah, yeah, it has been really affected. I'm not gonna lie about it. I mean, I've got like what they call like a primary cancer. So I was diagnosed at stage 1B actually. And it's not, the type of cancer that I've got is kind of straightforward, the way that you kind of treat it. But the complications is that some of the treatment is not very good for my disability. So, when they were planning the treatment, they had to weigh up whether chemotherapy was worthwhile. So they sent my cells to America on a system called Myriad, and they kind of came out with some sort of predictor that said how the outcomes would be affected if I had chemotherapy, if I didn't have chemotherapy, for like they give you like a 5 year and then a 10 year kind of prediction. And it was only 6% with chemotherapy. So we all thought that it was better that I didn't have chemotherapy, because all the things that chemotherapy causes I already have because of my disability. And I remember my sister quite seriously talking to me and saying, look, think about this very carefully. I wasn't disabled until I, got cancer and went through the treatment. You're already disabled. You're on the point of having your treatment. If you've got a choice where you can have some kind of treatment that would still be effective, you should really think about taking that kind of option. So I remember they decided to give me partial radiotherapy to protect my lungs. And partial radiotherapy is kind of new, but it's proving to be very effective. So that was another way around it. But I think the payoff is that instead of having like 5 years treatment, I've got 10 years treatment. And as that time goes, I'm halfway through at the moment. I touch wood, I'm still NED, no evidence of disease at all, which is what they expect. But my joints are affected, my bones are really affected. And also like I'm sort of got quite a lot of brain fog, so my brain doesn't work as quickly or in the same way as it did like before. And I get very, very tired like very quickly. So there's lots of things. There's more things than that, but that just gives you an example. Like I'm already like a wheelchair user, but I use like one of my legs to transfer, to stand and transfer, and I also drive an automatic car with that leg. And now like there's issues in me like falling over when I transfer, or I can't drive for as long. So they're just like some of the practical things that are are kind of quite challenging. And I don't think that I realized what it would be quite that kind of impact. But I think that also, like, if the hospital started out by telling you everything that they thought was going to happen right from the start, you'd be so overwhelmed. So what they tend to do is tell you in pieces and tell you like what the next thing of the treatment could be, what the next bit they think will be, so just so you're not so overwhelmed. And they're incredibly well, the team I had were incredibly good at that. But I also think that with cancer, it is quite unpredictable and it can have do what it wants, you know what I mean? And
Hmm.
so what they say is only a probability. It's not exactly what's going to happen because no one can predict that, you
Yeah.
know. But I don't think I quite expected. I think with me, like I talked about with my sister, I just thought, oh well, it's going to be like another thing like being disabled. It's going to be right. I'll sail through this. It'll be fine. And actually, it's been completely different.
Yeah, gosh, yeah. I mean, totally. But no, I guess what you said there about not being able to predict it, I guess in a way it makes it slightly more difficult because you don't necessarily 100% know what's going to happen. But I do think that, like you say there about kind of doctors kind of almost telling you things in pieces, I think that is probably the best way to do it because I think if you found out everything first off, it would just kind of send you over the edge. You've got this to deal with anyway, and then you're hearing about all the side effects. It would be a lot to cope with.
Yeah, I can genuinely now see why people sometimes don't have treatment or they only have bits of the treatment or I can see that. I can see, or they suddenly come to stop the treatment because they can't tolerate it anymore. I've had a few goes on different medication to see what effect that has, like swapped over different medications, and now I've gone back to a lot of the things that I was originally taking because a lot of those medications actually made things worse. But you've got to try these things. You've got to see if you can ease some things and some things that you can't.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like it's kind of trial and error, I suppose. Find
Yeah.
because everyone's different, so finding out what works for you and your specific needs. But I think it's fair to say that you've been a real trailblazer in kind of raising awareness for people with disabilities who have cancer. And I think it's such an amazing thing to raise awareness about. But you say, the feedback has been very positive. So, can you tell me about that? Have you had any people reaching out to you with similar stories? What's that kind of been like?
I think the main thing is that a lot of the people reaching out come from the US and Canada. And I don't know whether they're just more au fait with social media or whether there's just more of a community because they're bigger countries. So that's kind of the thing. And then some people who are not disabled have said, "Oh my God, I never even imagined like how, of course, how would you access a mammogram if you're in a wheelchair?" But I think the important thing is that there's a couple of people who are they were doctors, breast cancer surgeons, and another one was a breast cancer consultant. And then they had breast cancer themselves. In fact, one of them's just got it again for like the third time. It's recurred again. And they write a book called The Complete Guide to Breast Cancer. So they were updating it a couple of years ago and they kind of tweeted, "What do you think's missing?" And I tweeted them back saying a chapter on disability and breast cancer, and they and they kind of tweeted me back and said, "Would you like to write it?" And then in a private message they gave me all their details, and I ended up co-authoring a chapter that's never been in books before, um called Disability and Breast Cancer. So I co-authored that. And then there were a group of us that were in a fashion show for breast cancer now in 2023, and they'd never had a disabled person or a wheelchair user in the show. So I asked to volunteer as a model, and we kind of learnt a lot together do it during that. And then one of the guys, because men get breast cancer too, and not many people understand that either. But one of the guys put together a book with all sorts of stories from all different breast cancer patients, and it's called like Someone's Survival Guide. And I wrote a piece for that as well about what it's like when you're disabled and then you get diagnosed with breast cancer. So there's that kind of stuff that's going on, and I've had loads of opportunities from breast cancer now because they realise that they don't have very much representation of disabled people. So as well as being in the fashion show, I was in last year's Wear It Pink campaign, which is every October. It's Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And then they've just asked me to be in the campaign again. So that's good. And I've got a blog, a couple of blogs on their website as well. So that's good. And then there's other disabled people that I've either found or they've found me. So I've been asking them to write sort of like different blogs and stuff as well. So it's kind of a growing kind of area for me, you know.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it sounds incredible. And I think it's amazing how many opportunities you've had through that whilst also being able to raise awareness as well. I think that's really amazing in itself. And I mean, I know we've talked about the combination of having a disability and having cancer, but can you tell me a little bit about your disability?
Yeah, so I was born disabled. I won't tell you what it is 'cause I never really tell people
Yeah.
what it is because once you like tell people, they get all these ideas in their head about what they've read about it, and then they
Right.
make all the also they pass all these kind of judgments and assumptions, and it's just a
Hmm.
nightmare. So basically, I was born disabled, and my kind of disability is quite an old-fashioned one, and they said all sorts of things about what I could and couldn't do, and yeah, that just wasn't actually true. But I started walking just before I went to school. And that they didn't expect that, so that was a bit of a revelation. And then in my kind of mid early to mid 20s, walking became really difficult for me, and it was also dangerous, I think, really for my spine. So I sort of gradually became like a wheelchair user. So that's really like how my impairment affects me. And I've got like an accessible flat in London now with an accessible garden, and I drive a car, but I still can use one of my legs to drive. And I've got like how can I describe it? I've got like foot pedals that are extended, and then I've
Oh,
got a higher seat as well. So that's it. Yeah, that's basically what it is. I just tell people I'm like a wheelchair user, and that's how it is, you know.
yeah, no, fair enough. Absolutely. I mean, what you say there about obviously people having preconceived assumptions when it comes to your disability, I think that's quite interesting. And it's a strange thing, isn't it? A thing that I've talked about with quite a lot of my guests where people think that they know about a disability maybe just because they've heard about it or read things on it, but they don't actually know anyone with that disability. I think it's a very interesting phenomenon.
Yeah, it is. It is. I don't know. I just it still baffles me, decades later when I've always been involved in kind of disability justice and fighting for rights for disabled people. And I still don't understand that the basic things that happen to you where I'm with my partner and people start talking to him or they start talking to my personal assistant rather than me. And that used to happen when I was in my buggy when I was a little kid. And so my mum used to say, what's your problem? Just talk to her. She's here. And or she turned to me and say, "Do you want to tell her? Like, what do you want to answer that? Do you know what I mean?" And I think I was very fortunate to be kind of born to parents that just thought, well, big deal, she's disabled, so what? we're still going to do everything, and she's still going to do everything with us, and it's all going to be fine. I'm sure they were, worried beyond belief, and so my grandparents and extended family. But they kind of protected me from that and just kind of said, you can do what you want to do. So in my head, I've always tried to do what I've wanted to do, and try to kind of, as much as I can, push away like what other people like put on me. But that can be like incredibly difficult, and I particularly find it challenging kind of like in kind of medical situations. I actually find that kind of, yeah, just like really, really difficult. And most of the time my teachers at school realized that, I had potential, and I was quite bright. I was good at music. I was good at languages. So they encouraged me. But you did have the odd teacher, like my physics teacher, apparently at the first parents' evening at my secondary school, said to mum and dad, well, yeah, she's not very good at physics, but she's got loads of other problems. So let's not bother to address it. And my mum and dad were like, hang on a minute, that's not the right attitude to take at all.
Mhm.
You need to support her to learn physics better. Just because she's got all these other problems, so what? You're there to support her to learn. And that's why I think they had a very positive and healthy outlook on all of this. And they just wanted like the best chances like for me, and they didn't want other people to like shut them down. But even so, like it can be so tiring and a bit soul destroying when you've reached the age of 54, like me, and you're out shopping and someone just comes up to you and speaks about you to your partner. I mean, it baffles him as well. He's just like, what's going on here? The first time it happened when we were dating, he was like, wow, this is mind blowing. Like, why does this happen? And I'm like, that's the thing that you can't seem to change around
Yeah,
disability. You just can't seem to change it, no matter what you do, no matter what you say, no matter how you dress, how you present yourself. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is.
it's strange, and I don't know if you ever find this, but almost it sometimes feels like you can't. Obviously, your disability is a part of your identity, and that is an obvious thing. But it almost seems like sometimes people, like almost like the disability walks 10 steps in front of you. So people see the disability before they actually see you and the person that you are. And it's definitely a thing that I've maybe found in the past, and it feels like you can try all these different things to kind of, in quotes, fit in, because that's probably, fitting in is a thing in itself, but like you can try all these things to kind of almost detach and put the real, like your real personality in front of the disability. But I think it is always the thing that people kind of see before they get to know you.
Yeah, it's just so kind of true. I mean, I refer to myself as a disabled person. It's very much within my own kind of culture to say, yeah, I'm a disabled person. I'm politically active within it, and I'm really proud to be part of the community. But it you know I can give you example of where this kind of sort of manifests itself. So in 2018 I won an award for being a campaigner, a female campaigner, woman campaigner in the music industry, and I won Campaigner of the Year at the Women in Music Awards. And then after that, I was asked to do a series of things like speaking about women's issues. Yet I'd already been working in the industry for 18 years, but I'd never been asked my perspective as a woman or as a disabled woman. And I
Mm.
remember somebody was going to offer me another award or panel thing, and they were going to use an inaccessible venue. And I was like, just because I got a woman's award doesn't mean that I've suddenly become non-disabled. The two coexist, just as the fact that I'm a working class like woman as well. They all coexist with one another. But it's interesting that what you said about like you spend your time trying to fit in. And I have to say that's something that I kind of really didn't want to do. So myself, I deliberately were was drawn to things and drawn to music and types of books which accentuated the fact that I didn't fit in.
Mhm.
So that was in the time of I'm where I am in terms of my age, it's post-punk rather than punk that influenced me, although there are punk influences within me. But also like at the time when I was a teenager, um goth was really massive and really big. So I totally embraced that goth kind of, and I still kind of like dress like a goth now. And I think I still like the same bands and everything, really. It never really goes away. But I think that kind of thing about fitting in, I really, really did love the fact that I didn't. And I really pushed it to its limits so that, when I was at uni, especially, but I still do this now, having said that, like I know people are really going to stare at my legs because they're different and they're different to
Mhm.
one another as well. So I, on purpose, like wear really, really bright leggings and to accentuate it. And to me, it's amusing. To me, it's really funny. But other people, I think, can get a bit perturbed by it. But I just think it's hilarious. Any misconceptions there, my natural instinct to it is to just blow it up out of the water and do something completely different.
Oh yeah, I mean that's really interesting to hear kind of your perspective on that. And I think yeah, it's I think one of the things I've definitely found through the podcast is that everyone has such different ways of doing things. And obviously, everyone is so different anyways, and everyone has different attitudes to things, different ways of combating what they might be facing. And that's really interesting that you decided to kind of go against that kind of I guess that I guess that kind of like status quo that kind of want to fit in. And it's really interesting that you went against that and decide that that you were very, like you embraced that. I think that's a really great attitude to have. But you talked a lot about your kind of teenage years and school there. So, could you tell me a little bit about that? I know that you've mentioned your parents were very empowering, and you've also mentioned that you were, one of the first you were part of some of the first main disabled children in mainstream schools. So can you tell me a little bit about your childhood and how you found school?
Yeah, I mean, I think some disabled people find talking about school and their childhood very painful. But I honestly loved it. I thought it was hilarious. And I think my family are quite an outgoing family and they're quite social. So I think I loved all that fact that, I did stand out in the crowd and like, and I was quite small. I'm still small, but I was really when I went to school, people didn't ask me my name on the first day. They asked me how old I was because I was still like the height of a toddler. Yeah, I was 4.5 when I started school, and that's really interesting in terms of the conversation kind of striking up. And I think I still have those friends now because they're so used to me and what I do and what I can't do, and everything to do with that. So to them, it's just one of those things, and that's it. But I liked school because it sounds boring, but I really liked learning, and I was quite nerdy, but I really liked doing art and writing, and that was really encouraged in me. But mostly, I loved like music, so I played music, and I was involved in a lot of the music activities at school. And me and my sister also went to like another kind of school for 3 hours a week that specialized in music, like the local authority, like now it's music education hubs, but then it was sort of like kind of like music schools and stuff that they funded. And getting into music was it turned out to be probably the saving thing for me because there was just so much music around when I was younger. And also, I don't know if it's like this at school now, but all of our classes were kind of like the way that the classes were together. We were all kind of in our what I call music tribes. So you had your goth, you had your post punch, you had your like people we used to call them the five-star people, the people that liked all the popular pop music, and there was quite a lot of banter, especially in the teenage kind of parts of school, where in senior school around music and what music was good and what music was bad. Every day at school I'd be like called punk or goth or and it's just the way that it was between everyone. But I quite like that. I also formed like bands with my friends. They were all terrible, but it didn't really matter because that's what we were doing, and it was our interest, and it kept us out of trouble probably and stuff like that. So
Absolutely. I mean, it's so great that like it's great to pursue your interest anyways, especially if it's with your friends, with people that you get along with. It's a bit different now. We definitely have groups, we definitely have cliques, we definitely have friendship groups, but they're not really based on music, although you often do find that people in the same friendship group have the same music taste, or that, and I've definitely found this, you have friends with a completely different music taste to you who will recommend you stuff. So I found this particularly with one of my friends who's made me a huge playlist of her music taste and things that she likes. And I now I've started listening to it. I really, really love it. She's got an amazing taste in music. So you often do find that. But I do find that really interesting. And I absolutely love music as well. I think it's such an amazing thing. I think it can be used as a coping mechanism. I love how music can kind of like strike any emotion in you. And you can listen to I feel like there's always a song or a piece of music that can reflect exactly how you're feeling. But I wonder, where do you think that love of music stemmed from for you?
I reckon it's my dad. It's my mum to a certain extent as well, but it's my dad because, and I didn't realize this until my brother started. Because my mum died, like there's me and my sister that share a mum, and then my brothers have got a different mum, and so my brothers are about 20 to 25 years younger, roughly, to like me and my sister. And when my youngest brother started doing music, and he's really good at music, and then he actually went on to do music and drama at Rose Bruford, and he's in a really good folk band. He's an actor. He had a small part in Supercell. He's doing really well for himself. And we realized then that our love and our ability um for music and for playing music has to root in our dad, because that's the parent that we all share. And it was my dad that kind of like would actively like sort of buy records, encourage us to listen to records. I remember I was 11, like me and my dad went halves on buying Blondie's Parallel Lines, and I distinctly remember that's probably the first record I bought, but jointly with him. So, it's things like that. And there was always music on in our house, like always as kids, and there always is, you know, anyway. So, I think that is actually where it comes from.
Oh, okay, that's super interesting that it kind of stemmed from your parents. I think that's where mine might have stemmed from to some extent, mainly because my mum was always listening to music in the car. She still does. It's like a thing. It feels weird if we don't have music on in the car. And I think she wanted me to, because I've got no sight, she wanted me to maybe, to foster that love of music, maybe, because music was a big part of my childhood. And if that's what she wanted, it definitely worked, because I absolutely love music. But I'm curious, what are some of, your favorite artists or bands to listen to?
Now, here's where everyone's going to laugh because I love The Cure. And because they've just got an album out and everyone thinks they're great and they're probably going to play the Brit Awards, everyone thinks I just like made it up. But I absolutely love them. And I've loved them since I first heard The Head on the Door. So that was the album that came to me. My best friend gave it to me. He said, "Hey, listen to this. This is brilliant." When I was about 14 or 15. And at times it's been quite obsessional with The Cure, and my mum and dad have been worried at certain points of my teenage life or my early 20s when I'd be like waiting to book my tickets, or there'd be something going on. I'd be making and writing books about the Cure, and my grandparents are like going, "Oh, this bloke with the spiky hair and the red lipstick and the blue eyeshadow, yeah, should we cut off, but there's an article here in the paper, we'll send it to you," and things like that. So it was literally an obsession. But I do think the emotions that the Cure kind of stir up do lend themselves to having quite obsessional fans in a way. But I actually have made loads and loads of friends through liking The Cure. And also I'm very aware that I've been very, very lucky that I've actually met Robert Smith twice. And people say, "Oh, you should never meet your heroes. It's really disappointing." And that's so not true with Robert Smith. He's just such a nice, genuinely lovely, kind person that really listens to what you've got to say. And he does understand like fan kind of culture and fan support really well. And he also understands kind of like the world of disability, because him and his wife used to do a lot of things for MenCap, and they used to volunteer for MenCap. But he's also got a great nephew who's a wheelchair user who I've met. He's a really nice guy. And when his great nephew was looking for like festivals to go to ones to start with, I sort of gave him a bit of a list, a bit of help with that, and said, "Look, you want to start small and then get used to what it's like, and then build out from there." So that actually has been like a really, really kind of like nice connection. The first time I met Robert Smith wasn't anything to do with the work that I do. I just bumped into him backstage when I was about 21. I was at watching the Pixies at Crystal Palace, and he was there watching. And one of my friends happened to drop out of Goldsmiths College, and he joined a band called Curve, and they were also, I think, on the bill, and that's why I'd gone along as part of that kind of band. And that's how I ended up meeting him. But the second time was more kind of planned because they were playing Reading, and I always used to work at Reading with Attitudes, everything being in the accessible campsite there, having an information stall, and I had like a triple X kind of pass. So my support worker kind of sorted out an actual meeting where like we had a photo taken with the poster of kind of Attitudes Everything's Charter of Best Practice, as it was called back then. And that's when he talked to me about his nephew and everything. And then when I was on the viewing platform at Hyde Park, this guy in a wheelchair kind of making a beeline for me, and he said, "Hello." He said, I'm John. I'm Robert Smith's great nephew." And I was about to introduce myself. He went, "Wait a minute, but I know who you are anyway, because my great uncles told me all about you." And I was like, "Oh my God, how weird is that? That's brilliant." And we had a really good chat. He's kind of like at of an age now where he kind of lives independently and wants to lead his own life with his personal assistants like supporting him. So, that's really good and everything. That's brilliant.
Absolutely. And I mean that you've got a bit of a flex there, to be honest, because I that's not something that many people can say. I mean, not only that you were able to help him find some beginner festivals, but also that when you zoom out a little bit, were able to help, Robert Smith's great nephew. That's a bit of a flex there as well.
Yeah, that's probably one of the things in my career that I'd say if that was like one of the highlights of the 25 years that I've been running Attitude is Everything, what would it be? And I'd say, yeah, yeah, that probably is, and to think that I did like help as well is really good.
Absolutely, yeah. Now, I want to talk about Attitudes Everything because you've kind of mentioned it in passing, and it's such a great organization. I think we definitely need to go into more detail. So, you founded Attitudes Everything 25 years ago, I think that's right. So, can you tell me a little bit about it and what it is that you guys do?
Yeah, so Attitude is Everything improves disabled people's access to live music. So our mission statement is what we say is Attitude is Everything connects disabled people together with the music and live event industries to improve access together. And that's literally what we do. And it was founded by the Arts Council in 2000 as a 1 year pilot program, first of all. And basically, I was writing articles um in kind of like the press. Like one of the articles I wrote was for London's like Time Out magazine, and other articles about being disabled and being a music fan and how difficult it could be, and outlining some of the interesting accidents that I've had in crowds being disabled. And I was working for an organisation, a charity called Arts Line at the time, and they were writing access guides and assessing all sorts of art, culture, and entertainment venues and events. And basically, I had a phone call one day from someone who worked at the Arts Council who had got my phone number from somewhere, from someone somewhere, and said, I've read your articles. We have a pot of money to develop an access program for a year. Um, do you want to come in and talk about it with us? And that's how we set up Attitudes Everything with help from an organisation at the time. They were called Gig Right UK, but now they're called British Underground, and the Musicians Union. Members of Arts Line helped too, and then a Grey Wall and Louise Rakowski, who worked at the Arts Council at the time in the music department. So that's how it started, and we started with like 10 venues and 10 disabled people that were going to be what we call our mystery shoppers. They would test out the venues at the same time, and then basically we had the charter was like 10 ways in which you can improve, and at that time it was just on physical access because we were like developing stuff. And then when it got to the end of the first year, one of the Arts Council departments, one of the other departments said, well, I think we're going to take this on and develop it for another couple of years. So then we kind of added in a tour. So we took some disabled artists on tour around the UK. And then after that, we created a club night that was on every other month that had programs of disabled artists and non-disabled artists playing together. So that's how we discovered, like, for example, the Mystery Jets. Then in 2005, we were still going. Um, Melvin Benn from Festival Republic wanted to invest in a stewards program, and those stewards would be disabled people, and they would make sure that disabled people felt welcome and comfortable across venue sites and festival sites. And we started that off at Glastonbury. Um, and then in 2008 or 2007, actually, we had like a feasibility study into whether we could become our own charity. And it was said, yes, we could. The Charity Commission gave us charitable status. We separated out from Arts Line and became Attitude is Everything. And the Arts Council gave us our first set of regularly funded money and investment. And so, really, from 2008, we were from becoming our own organisation and growing into an organisation of then of for people, then we could start to build on things. Like, we didn't just want to focus on audience access. We knew that we wanted to talk about disabled artists. We knew we wanted to support disabled people who wanted to go into a career or were working in the music and live events industries, but couldn't really voice that sometimes because of discrimination or fear, or all sorts of stuff. And then of course we still have the volunteer program. So things are, every time, like every 3 to 4 years, you have to reapply for your Arts Council money. And thankfully, they've always seen potential in us, and we've been able to add a new program. But also, we have all sorts of people investing in us, which is absolutely fabulous. At the moment, we've got sponsorship because we've changed our charter to update it to like these current times, and it's called the Live Events Access Charter now. And PPL and PRS and Live um have all kind of like, they're just some of the kind of main sponsors. The MPA, the Music Publishers Association, they've all agreed to sponsor like the launch. We have other funders such as Paul Hamlin Foundation and John Ellerman Foundation, and Esme Fairbairn Foundation used to fund us, the lottery have funded us a couple of times, reaching communities, and the National Lottery Community Fund. So we've been really, really lucky. We've got some incredibly lovely corporate donors such as Key Production and Blue Raincoat Music. It's been incredible, like what people like want to do. Glastonbury still donate to us, Glastonbury festivals, and there's all sorts of individual kind of fundraisers that we have. So like um Blue Dot Festival kind of often donates to us. And about 10, 12 years ago, the members of Blue Dot Festival, Ground Control Company as they were called then, and a couple of the security companies and some of our team did a huge bike ride from the west coast to the east coast of England. It's called Coast to Coast, and fundraised like an incredible amount of money for us doing that, which was, it was brilliant, and it was just such a fun thing to be part of. I went and met them all at the very end in a small pub in, I think it was, yeah, in the northeast, and it was just an amazing feeling to see them all come in and be able to give them like these little like awards and stuff for, because it's an incredible thing. They were cycling across the country for like 2.5 days, and it was, yeah, it was a big thing, so that what Attitudes Everything does is support the disabled community to be who they want to be and do what they want to do in music and live events, whether they're fans, audiences, artists, creators, producers, event managers, everything that they would want to do, filmmakers, journalists. And then the industry as well kind of like needs our support and help. So we write kind of like guidance, and we do training, and we have all sorts of programs that people embark upon. So it's a big thing now. In my mind, I always knew that Attitude is Everything wouldn't be a pilot 1 year program because I wanted to do this as a career. But I don't think I ever thought it would get so big as it is now at 25 years. And there've been so many incredible people that have been on the staff team that have volunteered their time on the board, or volunteered their time to fundraise or to become stewards. We've got a lovely, big, like really great community like around us that want to help and do things, and that's been like really, really nice to be part of. So I guess it's, I'm trying not to think about it too much, but I've only got about 2 months left. I decided to step down from Attitude is Everything, um and after 25 years, so I'm trying not to think about it too much, but I know it's going to be quite a wrench because it's literally most of the the most of my thoughts have been occupied for 25 years with attitude is everything,
Yeah,
and what it can do.
yeah, absolutely. And I mean it I imagine that will be a very pivotal point in your life for you, just as the kind of foundation and the setting up of attitudes, everything was a pivotal point. It'll be, I imagine it'll be, feel very strange, but I think, it has been, yeah, and it still continues to be so successful. And I think you've just proved that in what you said there. And, I think it will continue to be super successful. And I think it's so needed as well. I think, like you say, live events should be able to be accessed by everyone, and music is such a powerful tool. So I think it's such a valuable organization. But what would you say it is that you love about live events?
I think it's the atmosphere and the community, like that you build around it, and the people that that are around that gig or fans of that gig. You strike up a conversation, you talk excitedly about what you love about the band, or if you're running an event, like you get really excited about what's going to happen, um you plan out the gig, you plan the well, it's social media now, but before it used to be like designing flyers and fanzines and stuff. And it's all that kind of thing. And sometimes I was reviewing bands as well. And it is like the whole thing that comes with it. And I think
Mhm.
that's really important. And I just want to go back to the fact that attitude is everything will continue for sure. I've always worked with very, very talented people, and there are so many great people on the team. Attitude is everything at the moment, and on the board, and they have their plans, for at least the next 5 years sorted out about where they're going to take Attitude is Everything next. So I don't have any worries,
Yeah,
in that school. I just don't, and I think it's right that you then let other people grow on your team and develop, and that it's their responsibility now. That's if that's what they want to do, to lead the organization. And I think that's like incredibly important.
absolutely. It's like you're kind of passing the torch on, isn't it? Like
Yeah.
you've started it and you've done so much with the organization, and now you're able to pass the torch on to other people. And I bet you're super excited to see where it will go in the future as well.
Yeah, I am actually. Yeah, because, I think I had a taste of that in a way during COVID, because I was for the first time, like, I've never been off sick for a really long period, and I was off sick for like 9 months. And I watched Attitude, seeing how it was developed, seeing what they were trying to do, like to support people during COVID, the training that they were doing, the mental health support they were giving to artists, and to watch that all unfold but not be involved in it because, I was trying to kind of get through the operation and the initial treatment. It's good to see something like that from the outside and unfolding all on social media. It was really, really exciting. So I'm like looking forward to sort of like, yeah, definitely seeing like where it's going next for sure. And one of the things that Attitude's really good at doing is highlighting different disabled people and different disabled people's voices, so that you'll get an extraordinary amount of really good like interviews on artists, and kind of or interviews with artists. You get to hear their music, or it might be someone saying, right, well, I've worked in the music industry for a little while, I'm disabled, this is how I found it. There's always something interesting, like as a newspaper piece like coming out, and that's like really, really good.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's a really incredible organization. And obviously, Attitude is Everything focuses on kind of making events accessible. But what are some of the accessibility barriers that you yourself have faced when it comes to live events?
Well, I think for me, given my kind of love of live music, I couldn't do it now because I'm too old and it's too hard. But I really loved like being at the front always of a gig and having loads of people surrounding me. But obviously, as a disabled person without any access built into that, I would get knocked over so easily or knocked. One time I fell underneath a barrier and slid under the lights of the stage, and it was very hot underneath there, and I couldn't really get out of that um until kind of like the gig was almost over and people realized what had happened. Obviously, there's the infamous one that I had where, I was at a big festival and I got my neck trapped against the barrier. And it was only because the person beside me looked down, realized what was happening, picked me up and threw me over the barrier to be rescued by like the security. So, that's what I faced. But at the beginning, there was kind of this idea that, well, is this what disabled people want to do? Do they really like music? Do they really want to go out? Do they really want to socialize? And I think what's changed now and what changed over about 5 to 8 years was the fact that now the industry expects disabled people to be there. They certainly expect them to be there as fans. They're still way off, I think, when it comes to expecting disabled people to be on the stage. I mean, that's um there's all sorts of reasons for that. There's just too many gatekeepers, I think, in the music industry that try and dictate what people should like within music in the UK and across the world. And to be honest, some of the best kind of musicians and the best music communities to be involved in are way outside mainstream like music. So there's that. Um I guess that is it, and sometimes I think sort of like venues forget that, you're not gonna just stay on the viewing platform. You want to go and look at the merch, you want to buy a drink, you want to do this, you want to do that. And sometimes like they forget that it's not just access to one area for disabled people. There needs to be access to all sorts of things, about that venue. They seem to forget that you if you've got a bit of money, you might want to spend it on merchandise and stuff. You might want to buy a drink. Do you know what I mean?
Mm,
So,
absolutely. I mean, yeah, like you can't just expect people to stay in one place just because they have a disability. They're going to want to do what anyone else is going to want to do, which
mm,
is soak up the atmosphere, explore a little bit, like you say, get merch that kind of reminds them of the concert itself. Of course they're going to want to do that. Like it does really need to be kind of fully accessible, not just the one place where they're going to watch the actual performance from.
that's right. And when I was younger, people used to try and stop me from going into places, and I'd say to them, what's wrong with my money? What's different about my money? And it threw them like security or venue manager. They didn't know how to answer. Because at the end of the day, what I'm saying to them is like I'm coming in, I've got money to spend, I've got a load of friends and family that are coming in to spend as well. Do you not want to make use of that?
Mhm.
Do you not want to make money out of us? And it was just always very interesting to see their reaction when you said something like that. They just didn't know how to answer it.
Yeah, that is really interesting. Like I think it would definitely, sort of throw people. Now, speaking of accessibility, I read that one of your kind of top quotes is and I'm gonna get this up so I can quote this correctly. Um, I read that it's kind of, my whole life has been about adapting and doing things differently because I'm disabled. Do you think that accessibility is one of the biggest factors in that?
Yeah, it is. I mean, you do have to adapt. You will know this on a day-to-day kind of basis. Access needs to happen. It's long overdue in many places. Access to information in different formats, BSL interpretation. There's it's not just by about physical access. means, but it is kind of like talking to people and saying, this is what I need in order for me to enjoy my life and have equity. I need these things to be in place. And what worried me during the pandemic was how so many kind of access solutions and actually basic rights for disabled people were kind of suddenly reversed and kind of stripped back to like bare basics. And for me, as someone who's always been involved in the push for access, the push for equal rights for disabled people, that really has scared me. So if you link that back to saying that attitude is everything, is needed, I think it's needed even more. And it was definitely needed during COVID to remind people when they were setting up, for example, the pilot events that they were like test whether it was safe for everyone, not just say people to return to venues and festivals. That in the first pilots, the government actually a policy, they didn't consider that people in the highest group that were clinically extremely vulnerable should be in those pilots. But when I returned, when they were making those decisions, I'd returned back to work. And I said, well, for a start, it's not a proper test unless you have those people in there, the highest effect, CEV people, as they were called, in there. Plus, if you want me to work at that particular event, I can't work it because I'm actually in that really high CEV group. And there was some very, very interesting conversation around that. And to be fair, the music industry said, yes, this is right. It won't be a proper test unless we include a diversity of people and the people in the highest CV group within it. So there were some very interesting conversations that sprung up from that, really.
That is interesting. That's very interesting, and it's a very valid point. But it is. I imagine it is scary, when we went from, I guess, almost before the pandemic, as if things were going up, and then when we went into the pandemic, that kind of drastic drop in accessibility. It obviously is a very scary thing to notice. And I know that you believe in the power of lived experience, and I know that you're a very strong believer in that. And, what do you think are, some of the benefits and, some of the powers of that?
Well, if people are willing to share their lived experience, it's brilliant because it comes from like it's authentic and it's the truth as that person sees it. It might not be that people have heard that experience ever before. And I think it's telling stories and that are very, very powerful and they can add to that whole societal change. And that's why I think it's the power of lived experience can change things, can change attitudes, can change laws, can change policy. There's no end to what it can actually do. And that's why it's so important that you always have, like, you bring forward different people to tell their stories if that's what they're comfortable in doing.
Absolutely, because how are I always think about like how are you going to make change or how are you going to make things more accessible or more inclusive or better for a specific community? I mean, not even just a disability, but any specific community, if you're not talking to people from that community.
That's right. And so what I kind of think about is like when I was younger, there weren't really any disabled role models apart from like two ladies who were on Grange Hill, and it's a couple of people on TV, but that was very rare. So I had no real role models that were disabled until much later. And you speak to disabled people that are younger than you or are just still in school, and they really like hold on to, well, that person's disabled and they're doing it, they're acting, they're doing this, they're doing that, they're playing music. That means that I feel that I can do that as well, because I see what they're doing, and that's so important. You can't be what you can't see, I guess. You can't model yourself on somebody if you're not reflected or represented in kind of everyday kind of experiences. So like, even like, it's really important to see people in adverts and stuff, but equally it's really important to have characters with fully developed life stories in things like soaps, because everybody
Hmm.
watches soap, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
And that's why I don't like these gatekeepers sometimes in like the music industry, who make decisions about, well, like one of our disabled musicians, she started using a feeding tube, and she was dropped by her manager because he said, well, no one wants to see someone on stage with a feeding tube like that. Now, how does he know that, they have loads of fans, that band. And actually, that band was taken on by one of the Manic Street Preachers, who invited like the lead singer up on stage. And he sort of said, I know how difficult it is for disabled people to be on stage, because people just have got these stupid assumptions that they make, and actually what should be important is the way that they produce and play music, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah, I completely agree with you there. So this is a question that I ask to all my guests, and it's one of my favorites to ask. And it is, what would you say has been your proudest moment so far?
Do you know, I think it is getting the MBE. I think it was a total surprise. you know, uh, they found that the organization found 10 people who wanted to give a statement, because you have to collect, it's a lot of work, for people who are going to nominate somebody. 10 people that I worked with, or, affected their lives in some way, to kind of um sort of support, they were like references, support the application. And then the Arts Council went ahead and made an application to the nominations committee. And I know that there are issues, you know, with the MBE, the fact you're a member of the Order of the British Empire. Yeah, I'm not so keen at all on the empire kind of word, because it goes back to some difficult historical times, and not everyone's a fan of the royal family. But for me, it just gave so much pride to my family. I come
Mhm.
from a working class background. I wasn't considered to be someone you know, who would make a success of my life. Yet here we all were as a family in Buckingham Palace, and there's me receiving my MBE, and I talked to the Queen, and that's that, and she made me feel really special just for the few moments that she spoke to me, and she seemed to be briefed on what I was doing, and she wanted to know more about attitude is everything, and what we did. And it just seemed totally genuine. And you know afterwards we had a really nice meal with the staff and the board. Actually, all my family were there. um like, the people who had nominated me, the 10 people that nominated me, there, like members of the Arts Council, members of the music industry. And it just felt like a really good celebration.
Yeah.
And it was really special. Like, it's like nothing else on earth. It's just an amazing thing, you
Yeah,
know.
absolutely. I mean, that is definitely a really, really incredible achievement and a real like once in a lifetime experience. And I imagine that must have been really, really amazing to be a part of. Well, thank you so much, Suzanne, for coming on the podcast. It's been Such a pleasure to get to meet you. I mean, just hearing about all your achievements, attitudes, everything, and all the other things you've done in your life. It's really incredible. And I think one of the things I really admire about you is how innovative you are. You're so passionate about, accessibility, raising awareness, and you're so innovative in your ideas and how, and how you're going to do that. And I think it's a really great quality to have because it means that you can do some really incredible things. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been such a pleasure to get to meet you.
Thank you so much, Evie. I've really enjoyed our talk and our discussion. Thank you so much for inviting me. And your questions were just brilliant and they just enabled me to open up and that's amazing. And I hope that you go on to a career in broadcasting and media. I really, really do, because they really need a very talented person such as yourself.
Oh, thank you so much. I would love to go into a career in that. And thank you so much for complimenting the questions. I mean, all credit to you, to be fair, because the questions are just a guideline. It's really about how they're answered. So all credit to you, but I'm so glad you found the questions helpful as well. Well, thank you again for coming on the podcast, and thank you so much to my audience for listening, and I will see you all next time.